Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, Fantasy Playoffs Weekly Preview Edition. I'm your host, John Macri, fantasy analyst here at PFF, and joining me once again to help you, the good listeners, ready to win those fantasy playoff matchups, it is the legendary Kate Magdziuk. Kate, how are you today?
I'm doing great. We're at a crucial must-win week. It's pretty much everybody. It's one or
Yeah.
done. So, we've got to help you make some of the best possible decisions for your lineups. We've got a lot of injuries, too, that we're going to need to navigate this week. I'm excited to dive in. I just hope that we can come through for our very favorite listeners.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to get you guys all the information that hopefully you're looking for, help you get those lineups set, and yeah, it'll be a fun one to go through here. We're going to go game by game as we usually do, hit on those key players and matchups. We'll include the timestamps in the episode description as well. But yeah, looking forward to it. I will do a quick ad break here from our presenting sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life, and then we will start it off. So as a parent, you've had to learn so many new skills to provide for your family, how to do copious amounts of laundry, meal plan for even the pickiest eaters, and now how to protect your family's financial future. Fabric by Gerber Life provides an easy one-stop shop for your family's financial needs, offering high-quality term life insurance policies plus other financial solutions in one easy online hub. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget, with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You could go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy, MEET fabric.com/fantasy. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, Kate, let's get it going here and start where we always do. Thursday night football, always a fun game to talk about. It's the New Orleans Saints at the Los Angeles Rams this week. Anywhere in particular you want to start with these two teams?
Let's start with New Orleans. Why not?
Sure.
Going up against the Rams, should technically sort of be a decent matchup. The Rams are allowing the seventh most fantasy points per game to the running back or the quarterback position. Could be an interesting spot for Derek Carr, but not gonna trust Derek Carr in such a crucial week. I'm sorry. Even though this looks like a great matchup on paper, I can't do it.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where, like, I think if people are desperate for a streaming option, and they very well might be considering the amount of injuries at the quarterback position. Like, we've talked about Derek Carr every single week on the waiver wire show just because of his fantasy playoff schedule. Like, he could be one of those guys that you plug in just because you don't have anybody else, and he could be serviceable. But for the most part, he's outside of that top 12 range pretty easily for me. And then yeah, just
He's
not
been
not
tough. Like
yeah.
I know he's been dealing with injuries too, so that's sort of been throwing some extra wrenches in the mix here. But outside of that week 15 outing, 218 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Otherwise, it's been like really tough sledding. 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, 1 touchdown, like the ceiling has been super, super low for Derek Carr, which the floor has been even lower. So I have some problems trying to really lean into that matchup in particular. But I think you're right. Like some people might be in some dire straits here heading
Yeah.
into week 16.
Yeah, that's pretty much, the only place I'm really looking to get him into a lineup, and his wide receivers have been banged up as well, right? Chris Olave banged up coming into this week, but it looks like he's good to go. Rashid Shaheed has been dealing with injuries, but he's another one that could be good to go. Um, I mean, outside of Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave, is there anybody else on New Orleans that you're like excited about starting this week?
No, I don't think you can. And I think maybe the one interesting somewhat spot is Juwan Johnson, who, coming off a game where had 2 catches, 38 receiving yards, and a score, which, a score pretty much guarantees you're going to finish in the top 10 here. The Rams are allowing the fifth most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. If the receiving core is, that banged up, maybe we see Carr go back to Juwan Johnson a bit. Maybe we see, some more Taysom Hill. Like I think if you're rolling the dice at the tight end position, I think you could probably do worse than both of these guys, but I'm not excited about either.
Yeah, makes sense. And the same thing, like I'm not excited about Rashid Shaheed either. There'll be better weeks for him, I think, but he's typically performed a lot better against man coverage and the Rams, one of those zone heavy teams. And there's just not enough there to like Rashid Shaheed and get him into lineups as far as, snaps and target rate goes, even though that's increased with Michael Thomas out, not necessarily the most favorable matchup this week for him. So how about on the Rams side of things? I feel like this offense, pretty easy to sort through here. So I feel like Matthew Stafford, we could start him. 12 touchdown passes and only one interception over his last 4 games, and that's including games against the Browns and the Ravens. So I feel like Matthew Stafford has kind of earned a starting spot in most fantasy lineups. Kyron Williams, absolutely, you love the volume there
Yes.
and the opportunity. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, I know, again, I talk about this in the wide receiver man zone report, but these guys have typically struggled against man coverage, but they also see decent target rates, and that's really what we're banking on here. And they may not be overly efficient this week with their targets, but there should be enough there to get them in starting lineups and be viable fantasy options. So, how about you? How are you feeling about the Rams offense?
I think you kind of covered it. That I don't know that you're necessarily feeling great about either of these wide receivers, but like you mentioned, the target rate makes it, really hard to consider actually sitting them at this point. And you also know what the upside is, right? Like Saints defense has been relatively stingy to the quarterback and wide receiver positions, like that connection. They've been forcing some inefficiency there. So again, could be one of those inefficient days, but I mean, you're starting Kyron Williams can't get much better volume than that. And he's been pretty matchup proof regardless this season. So, yeah, I think we kind of know what this LA Rams offense is at this point, and it's a fairly simple start sit process for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. So let's move on to the Saturday slate of games. And Saturday starts off with the Cincinnati Bengals at Kate's Pittsburgh Steelers. Kate, I don't know what you did to deserve Mason Rudolph for Christmas, but here we are. It is things are not looking great here for the Steelers. I mean, they've been out of sorts here for a while, and then even Najee Harris, we saw with a season low in terms of snap count last week. Only played, I think, a third of the offensive snaps. So this is a trickier situation to sort through. So how are you feeling about the Steelers offense? Is there anyone that you actually like this week?
I don't think you really like any of these options. It's very hard for me to trust anybody, just given the low scoring, lack of productivity in terms of yardage. Like this is a team that's kind of in dire straits on all fronts. Mason Rudolph hasn't played football in a couple of years. Like we'll see how that kind of comes in. He came in to close out week 15, but hasn't gotten a start in quite a while. So like he might have some rust to kick off here. Who knows how that's going to translate to the passing game here if they can get some rhythm going between Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, obviously, if you guys haven't been following around that disaster of a narrative here, things just look really rough, and it makes it very hard to trust any of these playmakers in a really critical situation because the productivity hasn't been there. The offense in general, just there's a lot of dysfunction right now, I think, between, you know, this entire group, coaching, players, locker room. Like it's not good. And if I can avoid any of these players on my roster, I am avoiding any of these players on my roster, which kind of seems a little bit insane. But like, I mean, you mentioned Najee Harris, relatively like just written out of this game script last week. Didn't even result in a ton of work for,
Yeah.
or a ton of efficiency in that work for Jalen Warren, 15 touches, 68 scrimmage yards. Like, ugh.
Yeah. There's not a lot to be excited about, right? And I was starting to get excited again about Deontay Johnson because I still really like him and touchdowns in 3 straight games. You look at like since he came back in week 7, he's wide receiver 21 in PPR over that span, right? It's just the concern now is what is this offense going to look like with Mason Rudolph? And I guess I just don't have the faith that it's going to be anything special, really. I mean, anything could happen, obviously. But like Deontay Johnson, probably the guy that I like the most out of this Steelers offense if I do have to pick one. And even then, he's like more of a wide receiver 3 for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think there's some upside to be had there, especially in terms of volume. I don't know that this team is necessarily going to look to involve George Pickens super heavily. Like there's most people around the league are saying like this dude needs to be benched, so perhaps they limit some of his role in that game, which could force an uptick in production from Deontay Johnson. You also have the fact that he scored a touchdown over each of the last 3 games, so like even when the yardage hasn't necessarily been there, the touchdowns have helped his case quite a bit. A touchdown 4 different games this year, and I think he's got to be the safest option you can have, but he is by no means a guarantee or a lock for a wide receiver today.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. And yeah, I think that I mean pretty much covers the Steelers because even yeah, Pat Fryermuth, it's a nice matchup against the Bengals, giving up the second most fantasy points per game to the tight end position, but it hasn't been there outside of that one game for Fryermuth. And like we've been saying, the offense is scary at this point.
Scary is one way to put it. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So let's go to the Cincinnati Bengals. They too dealing with some issues. Obviously, Jamar Chase is officially out for this week. He didn't practice today on Thursday, so that leaves T. Higgins as a potential option here this week. Had a really nice game last week with 2 touchdowns, so do like to see that from T. Higgins. I do feel like with Jamar Chase out of the lineup, like T. Higgins definitely becomes a starting option again. I feel like we talked about it last week where we wanted to see it from T. Higgins. He's shown it to us now. At least a couple weeks, he's strung them together and looks strong. So I feel pretty comfortable about starting him again on that kind of low end tight end 2 or wide receiver 2 range.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And he's got the upside, and this offense in general has a whole lot of upside. Obviously, there are question marks about like, is this productivity sustainable? Didn't see a whole lot of them out from, in their first matchup against the Steelers just a few weeks ago. But it is worth noting that the Pittsburgh Steelers, they just continue to take hits on defense that might put this Bengals offense in a really interesting position to take advantage of. They were already having issues at inside linebacker following injuries to 2 of their key guys. They've been kind of just rotating through the pack and haven't found a great answer at inside linebacker, especially in terms of coverage. Now, heading into week 16, starting safety Minka Fitzpatrick is out. Keanu Neal still on IR. Demonte Casey suspended. Like the entire middle of the field, I have to imagine, is just going to go uncovered. So I think this could produce some interesting results, maybe for Tyler Boyd, maybe for Tanner Hudson, who has ranked 3rd in total targets from quarterback Jake Browning this year, only behind Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd. Like, if they can just get these 2 working in tandem across the middle of the field, they might score 50 fantasy points, just the 2 of them on their own.
Yeah, I like that call. And yeah, we talked about it on the IDP preview last night. Like there's nobody left in the Pittsburgh safety room. Like even
I
Trenton
might be
Thompson,
trying out for
you might be.
safety
You
next
very
week.
well might be playing safety for the Steelers this week. Like Trenton Thompson was banged up as well. They were talking about putting Miles Killebrew back there. It's just like there's a lot to uh yeah, sort through there, but there's definitely opportunity then for the Bengals offense. So I'm with you. I like their passing options this week. But yeah, anybody else from the Bengals for you? Joe
No,
Mixon, yeah, like
you're
Chase Brown
starting
been
Joe
getting more
Mixon.
involved, but yeah, you still feel fine about Joe Mixon, right? Like getting the goal line work, that's been the main thing for him.
Yeah, I think, you're not necessarily worried about Chase Brown stealing work. Now, I do think he's a perhaps a viable streamer. If you're in dire straits at the running back position, I think you could do worse than Chase Brown. You also had, Cam Hayward, who had been diagnosed with a concussion this week. He was just cleared today. But again, this entire defense, especially in the middle of the field, not in a good spot. Chase Brown, he's seen some work, in the screen game, has had 9+ touches over the last 3 weeks, 50+ yards in each of those. Like, if you're in a what the heck kind of situation where like you're down and you're down hard in a crucial matchup, I don't think you could. Maybe you consider Chase Brown, but just know it's risky.
Yeah, he's looked good with his touches. I'm with you. I don't mind Chase Brown like in those deeper spots, like you said. Yeah, he's 30% of the rush attempts over the last 3 games. They've been getting him involved as a receiver as well. So there's opportunity there for Chase Brown for sure. All right, the other Saturday game is the Buffalo Bills at the Los Angeles Chargers. Man, this Chargers offense, I don't know really where to
What
start here.
Chargers offense?
There, yeah, good point. Yeah, we saw what it was last week. Just one of the worst games I think to watch on Thursday night. As high scoring it was just like torture. And
Yeah.
Austin Eckler is a big part of that, right? Like if you're an Austin Eckler manager at this point in the season, I don't know. Like, I don't know if he's not very startable for me. Like, he's somebody that I'm looking for any reason not to start him. We've talked about it a few times on this preview show, how ineffective he's been this season. Difficult matchup against the Bills. Who yeah, decent at defending the run here. I have their numbers somewhere. But they're allowing just 1 yard before one rushing yard before contact per attempt, seventh best mark in the league. The Chargers offensive line 30th in run blocking grade. So that doesn't help. You're also seeing Isaiah Spiller work in there. They're just even the opportunity for Austin Eckler isn't there. And you look at what he's done when contacted 2 or fewer yards from the line of scrimmage. 2.3 yards per carry, 30th out of 41 running backs there. 47.7 rushing grade when contacted 2 or fewer yards beyond the line of scrimmage, which is 37th out of 41 qualifying running backs. He's been awful. I am looking for reasons to bench Austin Eckler, and I will where I can this week.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks to say, and it's gonna really suck if in the fantasy football playoffs you bench him and he goes off on your bench. But like, there's nothing outside of name value. I think that, in terms of what we've seen from Austin Eckler, that kind of dictates that he should have a no questions asked role in your fantasy lineups here. You mentioned Isaiah Spiller, Joshua Kelly. Like, I really do think that this team, as they kind of close the door on the 2023 season, they need to evaluate what could be next for this team. I do think a big part of that is evaluating the running backs. They're not expecting Austin Eckler to re-sign with them this offseason. They're not expecting him back in any capacity. So that means that in the middle of this rebuild, they're going to be tasked with figuring out, like, okay, do we need to utilize some draft capital on the running back position? Do we need to invest some money in free agency? Do we need to make a trade? Like, part of that, I do think, is getting to properly evaluate Isaiah Spiller, who, coming out of A&M was just he was a solid prospect that we just haven't been able to see much of because of Austin Eckler on the field. I wouldn't be surprised if they utilize some of this time over the next couple of weeks to really just like figure this team out and figure out what they have on the roster, because they already know what Austin Eckler is. Like, they know what he
Yeah.
is, and they know he's not a part of their future. So, I hate to say it, but yeah, I could picture them continuing to lean in a heavy direction elsewhere.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the concern there for sure. So yeah, I'm just I'm with you. I don't think that he's with the team next year. So especially looking for a new contract, I would be shocked if he's still there. So makes sense that they would work in other guys. But other than that, for the Chargers offense, I'm sorry, Easton Stick. You're one of my favorite pieces of hockey equipment to use when I play road hockey. But other than that, I think it's Keenan Allen, and I don't know how much I'm trusting like Josh Palmer. I know he had the touchdown last week, but busted coverage. The guy was wide open. I don't know if that we're going to bank on that again here with Easton Stick at quarterback against the Bills. So probably just Keenan Allen for me this week.
Well, and also worth noting, Keenan Allen missed practice. We don't have his
Oh, great.
report here for Thursday. Keep an eye on Keenan Allen's status because he sat out last week, dealing with a heel injury. And I'm just a little bit worried that, again, knowing the trajectory of this offense, knowing that it is a lost season, if this is kind of a lingering issue that might affect him over the next couple of weeks, would it be out of the question that they shut him down entirely? I don't
Yeah.
know. But just keep a close eye on his practice availability Thursday onward, because um, that could be a key factor in a lot of these crucial start set decisions.
Yeah, that's a great call. Yep, I would be definitely concerning if Keenan Allen plays. I don't know that I'd be starting anybody on the Chargers in that case. So how about on the Buffalo Bills side? So this is at least some offensive players that we can trust here. Hopefully this week, Josh Allen, James Cook been fantastic, obviously, especially last week. But it's Stephon Diggs, obviously. So I guess the question marks probably come with like Dalton Kincaid at tight end. I know you wrote about this in your panic or antic column this past week, but no points, no catches for Dalton Kincaid in week 15. So where are you at as far as comfortability in starting him this week?
I'm going to be honest, not all that comfortable here, and obviously not having anything to do with the talent, but just the overall trajectory of this offense. They've leaned, since Ken Dorsey has been fired, they have leaned so much heavier into running back James Cook. I always want to say Dalvin Cook. They've leaned super heavily into James Cook. He's been a top 5 running back, a top 3 running back in each of the last 2 weeks. They had the week 13 bye, but had finished as an RB1 in each of the 2 weeks prior. James Cook is cooking. And it's not just on the ground. We're starting to see a lot more involvement from James Cook as a receiver, which you'll notice over the past few weeks as they've established the run, as they've gotten Cook more involved, and they're setting, Josh Allen up for some of these easier completions. They're turning the ball over less, and it's working. And I don't think they're going to deviate away from that. I think they need to continue, for the sake of the offense, to lean into James Cook. And it just seems that between James Cook, between, Stephon Diggs being the clear wide receiver 1, and a whole lot of secondary assets here, it feels like Kincaid's kind of gotten lost in the mix.
I think that makes sense. And yeah, like you've been mentioning, like Joe Brady, he's done a nice job kind of turning the offense around a little bit. They were going through their struggles, obviously. And I think like as much as like we like James Cook and Stephon Diggs, I don't think there's going to be a need to involve that much more from their offense, right? Going against the Chargers this week, a game that they should win pretty easily, I would imagine. We'll see. Maybe the Chargers get some magical Brandon Staley list boost this week, but I just can't really see it. I just think that there's not going to be a need to pass the ball a ton. We saw it last week as well. They even against the Cowboys, they really stuck to the run game, which that one more by design than anything. But I think they could just do that again here against the Chargers because there just shouldn't be a need to be passing too much against them. So I'm with you. I think Dalton Kincaid definitely seems like the odd man out here. Gabe Davis as well, like we've been saying over the past couple of weeks, like the struggles there he has had
Mr.
a
Goose
catch
Egg
in back-to-back
himself.
weeks. Yeah, yeah. So
Gabe
we
Davis invented the goose egg. Dalton Kincaid just copied it for 1 week.
oh nice. There you
I,
go.
it sucks, but it is what it is, man.
Yeah. It is. So moving on to the Sunday slate now, Indianapolis Colts at the Atlanta Falcons. Oh man, I we always got to talk about Atlanta, but so we may as well start there because obviously Bijan Robinson managers extremely disappointed last week with his performance and his usage. Obviously, he had the the lost fumble as well, but doubled in carries by Tyler Algier. I think it was like 14-7 or something like that. His lowest snap share, Bijan Robinson, since that migraine week or whatever it was. Are
Yeah.
you starting Bijan Robinson this week and hoping for a better outcome here? Because it could be a run heavy game script again. So we know Atlanta wants to run the ball. It should be a fairly close game here against the Colts. Feel like there's going to be opportunity there. So are you
I
starting
think
Bijan Robinson?
I think you do. And I like again, I know it's kind of sad to think of him and consider him such a risky asset at this
Yeah.
point, considering you drafted him probably as an RB1 in your league and it just hasn't come to fruition. He's still the RB 10 on the year so far, but again, that ceiling hasn't quite been what we want. He's had just one top 5 finish so far this season. Last week finished as the RB 64. So like if you were leaning on Bijan in week 15, he absolutely killed you and it's going to be hard to go back. But following that weird migraine game, came back, saw some decent workload. I would expect the same in this matchup, especially against the Colts, who have been, a more favorable matchup to opposing running backs, especially in terms of touchdowns allowed. These two teams, I think, match up fairly evenly in terms of offense, incredibly, just because, while Atlanta might have the edge in terms of like the quality of their personnel, I don't think the execution is quite as you know excellent as you would like to see, which I think puts these guys at a fairly even kind of matchup point. And I think this could be a run heavy game, which should be favorable for Bijan Robinson. Should be.
Should, right? Yeah, should. And Arthur Smith is listening to this laughing maniacally right now. But
Oh, he
I,
thinks this is hilarious.
yeah,
Keep
yeah.
laughing, buddy. Keep laughing.
Yeah, a couple more weeks hopefully. But yeah, it's yeah, fantasy managers obviously they're going to be scared off from that performance last week, but I mean, looking at Nate's rankings too, Nate has him as RB9, so I think he's thinking the same kind of thing here, bounce back usage and game script for Bijan Robinson. And like you said, he has been good when given the touches. But yeah, I think we could roll him out again. The other question is going to be the passing offense. Taylor Heineke's going to be at quarterback. So Drake London, Kyle Pitts. I Kyle Pitts, I'm not starting that one. I think I'm staying away from. We're talking about the run heavy game script. So Drake London, another one. And actually, I think you wrote about this one in your panic or antic column as well, because 2 catches for 24 yards in week 15 for Drake London. Not good.
After a
And
career best,
it's,
and that's what hurts the most, I think, out
yeah,
of any of these situations. It sucks because I think people finally got that one game that we've all been waiting for Drake London. Put him back into your lineup, and then
yeah,
boom, he goes kerplunk. I do think this wouldn't be the worst spot start for Drake London in this specific matchup, given that they are at home. You look at the splits for Desmond Ritter, he's passing, almost 250 yards per game at home, 3.6% touchdown rate, which it's not great, but it's still almost double what he's averaging on the road. The offense is more productive at home, and I do think that could be conducive to, a decent wide receiver 2 showing from Drake London. But again, you're still not expecting that sort of ceiling that we saw in week 14 that may have had us pretty excited for the future.
yeah, that's the thing, right? And yeah, we'll see what the offense looks like here with another week of Taylor Heineke at QB. But yeah, it's just London, right? He's been so up and down. 6 games now outside of the top 36 PPR wide receivers, and only 4 inside the top 24. So really playing roulette here with Drake London a little bit. But like you said, the talent is there. We know that he can have these big games. So not the worst matchup for him to necessarily do something this week against the Colts. And then on the Colts side, it seems like Jonathan Taylor's going to be back this week. Zach Moss did not practice on Wednesday, so it could be a Jonathan Taylor week. We've seen them ease him in coming off injury before, so Are you starting Jonathan Taylor? Because it feels like he's probably a startable option, especially if Zach Moss can't go.
Yeah, I think if Jonathan Taylor's active, you start him. I have to imagine if he is active, that means he can grip a ball, which is obviously like the biggest concern in general for a running back with a thumb injury. So
Hmm.
you have to imagine that he's good to go. And yeah, you fire him up with full confidence. I have no reservations about starting Jonathan Taylor if he's active.
Awesome. Nice. Like that. Yeah, other than that, I mean, Michael Pittman, he was limited on Wednesday in practice dealing with the concussion. We'll see if he gets cleared or not. But yeah, obviously he would be a starter if he's active. Um, and Gardner Minshew may be a potential streaming option this week. He's been pretty good lately. Over the past 3 weeks, earned an 81.8 passing grade when kept clean, which is eighth best among quarterbacks. He's thrown 6 touchdown passes with no interceptions or turnover worthy plays in that same span when kept clean. This is one of those matchups that the Colts do have an advantage in the trenches and should be able to limit pressure that Gardner Minshew sees and keep him clean. So I don't mind Gardner Minshew as like a streaming option this week, but I mean, really, probably more of like a super flex option more than anything, because there could still be better streaming options that are available to you. But Minshew at least has some positives to look at for this week's matchup.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
All right, let's go to the Green Bay Packers at the Carolina Panthers. And where would you like to start with these two teams?
Let's start with Carolina because I feel
Sure.
like this is like a pretty
Yeah.
easy half of the ball. Is there anybody that you want to start in Carolina? Like real like is there any way you're feeling, confident about like Chuba Hubbard? I think you're starting. He's been a
Mhm.
top 20 running back in each of the last 4 weeks. He's been getting the volume. Or sorry, 3 out of the last 4 weeks. He's been getting the volume. Clearly the number one guy, but like outside of Chuba Hubbard, who I don't even think has as much upside as you'd necessarily like. Um, there's just not a whole lot of stability here with this passing offense, with their options. And I mean, even Adam Thielen, for as solid a start as he's had to the season, like since their bye week, hasn't finished inside the top 20 in a single
Yeah.
week. So I'm assuming we're sitting Adam Thielen, correct?
I'm with you. I'm sitting Adam Thielen. Just the
Oh,
offense in general has been so bad. It's just like it's hard to watch at points, and just there's just not a lot there from the passing offense. And hopefully Bryce Young, in year two can bounce back kind of thing. Because obviously being the first overall pick, there's hope there, but hasn't looked good this year. So yeah, I think it really is just Chuba Hubbard this week. 22 or more carries over the past 3 games since Frank Reich was let go. So we do like that for the volume of touches. So yeah, I think it's just a Chuba Hubbard offense for me.
yeah. I don't know. He's going to show up on the injury report one of these days with a back injury from
Uh,
carrying this whole team on his backside. Just
yeah,
saying.
very, very likely. So let's talk about the Green Bay Packers then. I think Aaron Jones probably the one to look at here, at least to start. And we saw him come back last week and was kind of eased into action, which I don't think was too big of a surprise considering they've done that with him prior to earlier in the season, I guess. And I think there's at least a decent chance that we see him get more involved this week. Because AJ Dillon was out last week. Hopefully, I mean, I say hopefully, but for Aaron Jones' sake, hopefully AJ Dillon is out again, right? And I think that will lead to more touches for Aaron Jones. So I do like his potential this week in a positive matchup against the Panthers, who are allowing the third most fantasy points to the running back position. Like I feel like Aaron Jones is a decent start this week, and just kind of projecting that he'll get more touches than he did last week.
Yeah, and this has been just kind of a matchup that, teams are planning to run against. Like this has not been a team that necessarily you need to throw the ball against just because of their point differential. Second lowest point differential in the league to this point. Like, yeah, you don't need to sling the rock. 50 times a game against this defense. That has, created some plus matchups for running backs. And, on the other side, it's caused some down weeks for, some of these opposing fantasy quarterbacks. Jordan Love, I am not a huge fan of this week. He's actually been a pretty solid, like low end quarterback one over the last month or so. And I think you've got to consider that this might just be one of those matchups that this is going to be a run heavy game script. I think we're going to look at, maybe, um, you know, 20 plus touches for Aaron Jones in this game. And I think that that's going to kind of like wrap it up. And we might not have as much viability through this passing game as we have in prior weeks.
Yeah, I think yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with you there. And just looking at the injury report too from today, it looks like it's out now. Christian Watson, non-participant here on
Mm.
Thursday, and Jaden Reed didn't practice today on Thursday either.
Mm.
So again, coming down to the passing offense, maybe Romeo Doubs is somebody, that you can stream this week, but not overly excited about it because I'm with you. I think it is going to be a run heavy game script for the Packers this week. So maybe just more in the favor now of Aaron Jones this week. So do like that.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's fair.
let's go to the Cleveland Browns at the Houston Texans. And this one, let's start with the Texans side of things, because for the running backs, I mean, it doesn't look like CJ Stroud is going to play. So first off, Case Keenum is going to be the quarterback. So another team that may have no choice but to run the ball here, against the Browns' very good defense. Devin Singletary dominated the touches last week, and that was nice to see for fantasy purposes. So Devin Singletary feels like somebody that we're starting at this point, right, Kate?
Yeah, and I think like you look at the splits, obviously, we've seen some ups and downs from this backfield entirely this season. Like one week it's Dameon Pierce, one week it's Devin Singletary, but I mean they absolutely, I think, look to keep the ball out of the quarterback's hands as much as possible last week. Really hard to sit a guy, even in what's a pretty tough matchup. That has the potential to touch the ball 20 plus times. And I do think that Devin Singletary, one of those few guys that you can probably pencil in for 20 carries plus and call it a day. So still starting Devin Singletary here, but honestly, yeah, he's probably the only, running back or any fantasy asset that I think is really a viable start here. It's a bummer
Yeah.
to say because this Texans offense has been surging, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
it was fun with CJ Stroud and Tank Dell and Nico
yes.
Collins, but right, but it's a different team right now, and Case Keenum's going to be at quarterback because, yeah, Stroud did not participate in practice here today, so doesn't look like he's going to be cleared for this game. Nico Collins was limited on Wednesday. I don't see anything for him from today, and then Noah Brown had a really nice week last week going against the Browns defense.
No.
Again, 31st most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, so that's second fewest. And Noah Brown has not performed well against man coverage either. So for that part of it, I am with you. I think it's just Evan Singletary this week. I think we play it safe here with this Texans offense.
Yeah, not looking to get cute. If this were an offense that had all of their top options, I'd say, again, tough matchup, but you still believe in the team, you believe in the fact that they're at home, but I mean, without CJ Stroud there to execute, not loving, not loving the potential here. Don't think the ceiling is high enough to justify some of the risks that you're going to incur if you roll the dice with anybody besides Devin Singletary.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I just yeah, Case Keenum at QB just it worries me, that's for sure. On the Browns side of things, they also have a backup quarterback. It's Joe Flacco at the helm here. So anybody on the Cleveland Browns side, because I feel like David Njoku's been a really nice start. I feel like he's pretty safe here to leave in lineups. But Amari Cooper, another one of those guys that's been kind of up and down. So where are you at with the rest? I guess the rest of this Browns offense, and maybe starting with Amari Cooper. Do you have him ranked somewhere that's startable?
Yeah, I have I have Amari Cooper ranked as a wide receiver too. I don't think the ceiling's necessarily as high as you'd like it to be, but he's been a top 20 wide receiver each of the last 2 weeks. Joe Flacco, he'll be willing to just kind of throw the ball in the air. Um, the one thing that I do want to mention with this entire Browns offense is the fact that, like, looking at the running back situation, we had Jerome Ford assuming this just monstrous workhorse role, the to start the season after Nick Chubb's injury. Um, I just want to, like, reassure people that Jerome Ford probably not a must start option anymore at this point in the season, not getting as much volume over the past, like, 5 weeks or so. We've seen that kind of gap between him and Kareem Hunt closing a little bit in terms of workload. Not seeing those 20 plus carry games that, we want. And again, this Houston Texans defense, I've mentioned it on previous shows of ours, been looking pretty solid against the run this year, been holding opposing running backs to, some low efficiency rates. I think this could be maybe a little bit of a trap game if you're still of the mindset that Jerome Ford is a must start just because he's a starting running back, like fading Jerome Ford pretty hard here in week 16.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't really feel great about Jerome Ford. And like you said, the gap is closing as far as usage goes between him and Kareem Hunt. And he started off pretty good with Nick Chubb out of the lineup, right? He had like the 100-yard plus rushing game. Then he had a touchdown after. He's had, a couple games that he's been pretty good, but it's just the usage, the involvement here has been lessened, I guess, over the past few weeks with Kareem Hunt getting more involved. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't think there's really much else to look at here for the Cleveland Brown offense. Um, so let's go to the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings. Looking at the Viking side of things first here. So the Lions are actually giving up the fifth most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. So I know Nick Bodiford here at PFF wrote up Nick Mullins as his QB streamer of the week. He loves some Nick Mullins this week. There is an advantage in the trenches here for the Minnesota Vikings offensive line, one of the better offensive lines in the league, whereas Detroit really only has Aiden Hutchinson on their defensive line. Nick also mentioned 79.5% adjusted completion rate for Nick Mullins, which ranks third among 53 qualifying quarterbacks. And a nice little tidbit here that the Vikings are calling the highest rate of play action with Nick Mullins at quarterback, and the Lions are the league's worst coverage team against play action. So there's a lot to like here, I guess, about the Minnesota offense with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. All those guys have advantages in their respective matchups as well. So Nick Mullins, as pointed out by Nick Bodiford, could be a nice streaming option here.
I love that. The Nick to Nick stack.
Yes.
And you look at the weaponry, right? Like, if you're going to trust one of these lower tier quarterbacks, you're going to trust the guy that's throwing to one of the best skill position player groups in the league. So I think that's a great call.
Yeah, it's similar to like why we like Brock Purdy so much. And he's been efficient, but like he's throwing to some superstar players at all positions, right? So you take advantage of that and then hope those guys can do the rest for you. So other than that, I mean, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, these guys are startable. TJ Hawkinson, obviously. The running back position is gonna be interesting this week because Alexander Madison did not practice on Wednesday. I haven't seen an update here for Thursday. I'm looking right now. I still don't see anything for Thursday for the Vikings. So Alexander Madison, when he was out, Ty Chandler dominated the touches and had a really nice fantasy week. So Alexander Madison, we really want your ankle to do better and heal nicely. Rest a couple more weeks. Let's let Ty Chandler handle the carries here. If Alexander Madison does come back, then I become a little bit more concerned about Ty Chandler. How about you?
Yeah, I don't love the matchup. The Lions have been,
Yeah.
pretty solid against the run this season, but I will say, like, that workload really, really hard to sit a guy with 20 plus carry potential, and Ty Chandler definitely has that. You love to hear the comments from Kevin O'Connell after that game too. I talked about it a little bit in the rushing report here coming out of week 15. He seemed to be really impressed with what we saw from Ty Chandler. I think Ty Chandler brought this element of toughness and explosion that I don't think this team's seen from Alexander Madison to this point in the season. Ty Chandler, he's had both of this team's, both of the running rushing touchdowns within the running back room. Ty Chandler has been, I think, passing the eye test, and then he passed like the everything test once he finally got the workload. Kevin O'Connell did mention like that's a guy that they want to keep as a focal point. I'm paraphrasing here, but a centerpiece in the offense moving forward. I could picture this being a situation where Alexander Madison might have lost his starting role. Again, you don't love the matchup. Tempering expectations just a little bit for Ty Chandler, which, against this matchup, but still, I think, especially if Alexander Madison's out, you're going to have a tough time sitting him just based on a volume perspective alone.
Yeah, I am with you 100%. And then on the Lions side of things, I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, all starters. Um, Jameson Williams, we saw get more than 2 touches for the first time in his NFL career. So he could be more involved, hopefully again this week. It would be nice to see it more than just the 1 week and see how much more involved he is again this week. So probably not somebody that I'm overly excited about starting this week, but I feel like for those deeper leagues, Jameson Williams, at least it was encouraging to see him get more involved, and there could be some potential there in an offense that can move the ball. And Jared Goff, who has been playing well recently as well, another one of those guys that has decent weapons all around, right? He has Amon-Ra St. Brown at wide receiver. He's got Sam Laporta at tight end. He's got the running backs. He's got Jameson Williams now potentially as well. So Jared Goff could be another one of those streaming options for me as well this week, despite it being on the road in Minnesota, who are one of the better teams, one of the better defenses here. But yeah, anybody else for Detroit for you, or anything you want to expand upon for that group?
No, I
No.
think the Detroit Lions, they're pretty clean at this point in the season. It's nice. I'm happy for these Lions, man. They're just on the cusp of winning that first ever NFC North title. And I don't know, is this the week that might seal the deal for them in that victory? Like this is a pretty exciting week for Lions fans, and uh I'm just loving and enjoying watching this offense, both for fantasy and in real life, I just have to say.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's been nice to see, and yeah, Detroit sports fans can use some positives here this season. So yeah, the Lions might be their only hope for that right now, unfortunately. But yeah, other than that, let's keep it rolling here and head to Washington at the New York Jets. Which team do you want to start with these two guys?
Let's start with the Jets.
Sure.
But, um, they're the Jets, what else can we say? I mean, are you comfortable going back to Garrett Wilson? So like after, he's been kind of a solid play in recent weeks, but, had a abysmal outing here just last week. Like, do you feel confident going back to Garrett Wilson at this point? He was a wide receiver 65 in full PPR formats last week. Not is is the Washington Commanders secondary bad enough that they might actually make this Jets passing offense look good? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it helps. I mean, they're definitely not as good as Miami, right? And we saw that Miami pass rush absolutely dominate the Jets offensive line and Zach Wilson last week. You don't worry about that as much with Washington trading away Montez Sweat and Chase Young. They only have their interior guys there. So there's at least that for them where I think, yeah, not comfortable starting Garrett Wilson, but I'm starting Garrett Wilson, right? Like in that wide receiver 2 range again. Washington giving up the second most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. So you do like that part of it, but there's always going to be concern when it's this Jets offense and it's Zach Wilson. And the same thing with Brees Hall as well, right? Like Brees Hall barely cracked, I think, a third of the offensive snaps last week and led the team with a whopping 6 carries. Like what are we doing here? It's so frustrating sometimes, but you kind of have to bet on the talent, I think, with Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson. And those are the only guys that I think I'm trusting and just hoping for the best, hoping for a more favorable matchup here against a Washington defense that has definitely struggled this season.
Yeah, I think Garrett Wilson, you probably have to start him second most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers the Commanders are allowing this year. I still think you're starting, Brees Hall, and that's probably where it ends.
Yep, I am with you. And then on the Washington offense, I mean, poor Sam Howell didn't he got benched last week, but he wasn't playing well. And then Jacoby Brissett comes in and immediately turns Terry McLaurin into the fantasy wide receiver that we were hoping he would be. It does sound like Sam Howell will be starting again this week, but man, the Jets defense has been a tough one. That has been their strength all season long, limiting fantasy points to quarterbacks and wide receivers. So the Washington passing offense is definitely one for me, at least, that I am trying to avoid for the most part. And if I do have to start somebody, I mean, I don't mind like Curtis Samuel, he's been a lot better against man coverage this season, and the Jets are one of those top 10 teams in man coverage rate this season. So he could be somebody that's like a sneaky play if you really have to pick somebody, but we haven't seen the connection with Terry McLaurin and Sam Howell yet this year. So that's where I have my concerns in him having another big game, but might not have better options in that wide receiver 3 range. So I don't know. Anybody for Washington for you that you like?
No, I'm fading Terry McLaurin. I know he just had a
Yeah.
fantastic outing, but like you said, like a lot of those fantasy points came on the back of Jacoby Brissett, who's not going to get the start this week. 93 receiving yards and a touchdown came from Brissett specifically. That was like, I don't know, like 75% of his fantasy production came, with what, 7 minutes left in the game and Brissett under center. This has not been a fruitful connection overall. So definitely not trusting that on the back of another matchup against a really challenging defense here against the Jets. No way, no how.
Yeah, I am with you. And then their backfield, it looks like Brian Robinson was DNP on Wednesday, still dealing with that hamstring injury and seen working out on the side at Thursday's practice. So potentially he could come back this week. If he does, feel like he's probably in more of that kind of flex range, if anything, working off a hamstring injury. But yeah, we saw it last week. It wasn't Antonio Gibson that led the team in carries either, right? It was Chris Rodriguez. And I know you wrote about that in the rushing report. So if there's a chance that Brian Robinson misses this game, how you feeling about maybe a potential Chris Rodriguez play in week 16 here?
I think you could do worse in terms of finding guys maybe available on your waiver wire. Again, I'm not like crazy about this matchup in general, just for the fact that like Chris Rodriguez, he was the guy who saw the you know the rushing work primarily.
Right.
Antonio Gibson still maintained this role as more of the receiving back. And if they can't get the run established, if they can't get Sam Howell into rhythm, I do worry that okay, maybe that's going to be the opportunity where they bring in Antonio Gibson and he's going to ruin your entire day just by being that primary asset on the field at running back, even if he doesn't touch the ball a whole lot. Like I can picture that sort of scenario playing out here. So again, like if you need a start at running back, I think Chris Rodriguez probably going to lead this team in rush attempts. It's just a matter of like how many rush attempts are you really going to get out of this team? That I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a riskier play for sure, and it's going to depend a lot on Brian Robinson's availability. But we did see it last week that he did lead the team in carries with Robinson out, so there's potential for touches there. And sometimes that's all we're really looking for here in those deeper leagues. So Chris Rodriguez, just a name to kind of keep in the mind of fantasy managers. But anybody else from Washington for you?
Nah.
All right, awesome. This podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a skill-based, real money daily fantasy sports game. How does it work? You pick 2 to 6 players. If they will go more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. So, Kate, the one that I went with for tonight's game, the Thursday night game, was Kyron Williams, more than 18 and a half receiving yards. He's had at least 4 targets in each game since returning from injury. Last week had this really kind of crazy stat line of 5 catches for just 3 yards. And then there was another weird one, even the week before that, where he finished with -1 receiving yard on like 3 catches. But not banking on that happening 3 times in a row. He's also had games of 48 and 27, 24, 61, another 24 receiving yard game. So he's definitely cleared that 18 and a half plenty of times this season. And I think we could see that again this week here going against the Saints. So like Kyron Williams, more than 18 and a half receiving yards. But anyone that you like this week?
I really like that pick here. I think one of the weekend slates that I want to highlight here is Tanner Hudson, more than 32 and a half receiving yards. I already mentioned earlier when we were talking about the Steelers here, their issues at inside linebacker, now at safety. I really think this could be an opportunity to work that middle of the field. I love Tanner Hudson, especially this team has just been allowing opposing tight ends to walk all over them. Why not Tanner Hudson here in week 16?
Nice. I like it. So yeah, go to prizepicks.com/PFF fantasy and use code PFF fantasy for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/PFF fantasy and use code PFF fantasy for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, Seattle Seahawks at the Tennessee Titans. Let's start with the Titans offense because it's a pretty straightforward one to figure out here. And another one that you had talked about in Panic or Antic this week was Derrick Henry's incredible inefficiency in Week 15. So where are you at with Derrick Henry? Are you concerned? Not to give away the article here too much, but are you concerned about that inefficiency in Week 15?
I am. I'm super, super concerned. On fantasy managers, like I feel like he was able to kind of mask some of those inefficiencies just because of touchdown production prior to week 15, had 3 straight games with 2 or more touchdowns. Like it was absolutely insane. So like, yeah, you're going to ignore some of those inefficiencies on the back of multiple touchdown games. I don't know that this is a I don't know that this is a situation that we really want to lean into in the fantasy football playoffs. Derrick Henry, he's too good to sit, but given the involvement of Tajay Spears, given the fact that like after this game, we've seen him come out and say, yeah, like he wants to play for a contender. Like I do think this is, one of those matchups that it looks really good on paper, but it's like, what is Derrick Henry going to be able to accomplish in this matchup? Don't know.
Yeah, it didn't look good last week.
It just looked like he
0.56
was
yards
running
per
into a
carry.
brick wall. And
Yeah.
maybe that's it. He has played 2 really challenging defenses back
Yeah.
to back, the Texans and the Miami Dolphins. So maybe that plays into it. Am I a recency bias um type of person right now? Like
Well, look, it's the inefficiency is definitely concerning, and we've seen it be a problem for a lot of fantasy running backs this season. And if he isn't scoring the touchdowns, then that's where you get concerned, right? Like, because I don't think that this offense is good enough to sustain long drives or anything like that. So, and especially with Tajay Spears working in there, so I definitely see the argument. I think that the main thing is just the overall volume for Derrick Henry, right? 16 carries, I think 20 total touches last week. So that's been the nice part of it. But if he's not going to do anything with those touches, then that it definitely becomes a concern, right? And we've seen that with Austin Eckler this year as well. So touchdown dependent play, I think probably an RB2 more than anything. But yeah, just hoping for some volume and then getting those goal line touches. But that's pretty much Derrick Henry this season in a nutshell.
Yeah, definitely more of a boomer bust option. I mean, like from a yardage standpoint, like just hasn't been super productive. 40 or fewer rushing yards in for the last 7 games. Like,
Yeah. Not great, not great.
no.
Yeah, luckily he's got those touchdowns to help him. But other than that, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, I feel like probably a starter in that low end wide receiver 2 range as well. But anybody else for you for Tennessee this week against the Seahawks?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. And then on the Tennessee side of things, it seems like Geno Smith will be back at quarterback this week. But not that Drew Lock was overly terrible on Monday night either. So we like DK Metcalf. I feel like I like Jackson Smith and Jigba as well, like in a flex range for me with along with Tyler Lockett, but there's definitely a world where I'm starting Jackson Smith and Jigba over Tyler Lockett if looking at it a little bit here. And Tennessee, Tennessee, one of those teams that does play about an average rate of man coverage, but they are among the 5 worst teams in the league when playing man coverage as far as yards allowed per coverage target and explosive play rate allowed in man, where Jackson Smith and Jigba ranks second on the team in target rate with 23% and fantasy points per route run at 0.4 against man coverage this season. So I kind of like him as like a stronger flex play this week. And maybe it's just watching that touchdown that he scored on Monday night, just being so nice and falling in love with that. But I like Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he could be one of those flex options for me this week.
Yeah, I think that's a solid call. I mean, just in general, watching the development of Jackson Smith and Jigba over the last like month or so, you're starting to see that role increase. I think he's just looking, just a bit more confident, a bit more competent every single week. Just passing that eyeball test by a mile. You love to see the touchdown and him being able to step up in such an important moment in that game. I think he's definitely earning his stripes in this offense. And yeah, I think that could be a pretty favorable spot to keep him going.
Yeah, I'm with you. Other than that, I mean, Kenneth Walker, I feel like we saw him kind of take back the large majority of snaps in the backfield and carries last week. So feels like he's back to being a safe start here without there being a major concern for Zach Charbonnet kind of eating into his touches. So are you feeling the same way about this backfield? Is there a decent gap between the two for you, or do you think Charbonnet's a little bit closer than last week showed?
One thing that I definitely want to keep an eye out on is Kenneth Walker's like overall health status.
Mm.
Sat out of practice. It wasn't a full practice. It was like a walkthrough here, but listed with a shoulder injury and missed practice with that. I missed the walkthrough. Um, not totally sure what that all will be about, but I'll be keeping an eye on the practice report moving forward. We'll see if he does like once they actually get back into full practices, like if he's still missing time, if he's still limited, like I keep an eye on that because that could put Zach Charbonnet in for maybe a greater share of the workload, even if Walker is active.
There you go. So yeah, definitely injuries to keep an eye on there. And another injury that just came across, it looks like Keenan Allen has been ruled out for Saturday's game versus Buffalo. So we just talked about that a few minutes ago. That game for the Chargers, it just gets even worse for that offense. So there you go. No Keenan Allen this week. Um, Anybody else for the Seahawks? Back to that team for you. Anybody else to talk about there?
No, I think we got it.
Got it. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are up next on the slate. I guess starting with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. I mean, Chris Godwin has been playing a lot better lately, coming off a really nice week last week where he was PPR wide receiver 4. He's had 11 targets now in back-to-back games, which has been really nice to see. Baker Mayfield obviously making a conscious effort to throw him the ball. Still just the 1 touchdown on the year, which is a bummer, but Baker Mayfield playing better, the Bucs in general playing better. There could be room now for Chris Godwin to kind of move up the ranks and get into starting lineups here, especially considering how decent this offense has been, Rashad White, Mike Evans included.
Yeah, this also is like a fairly favorable matchup for them to get the ball rolling. Top 10 in fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Baker, I think, is also a fine streaming option with the way that
Yep.
this offense has just been executing at this point. Like he coming off arguably the best game of his career, 381 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns. Just was so dominant on the road in Green Bay, which that can be a pretty hostile environment to play in. Um, so all overall, just excited about this Tampa Bay Bucks offense. You're starting Rashad White, full confidence. But I think really both Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Baker Mayfield all like if I had a lineup with all three of them, I wouldn't be mad about it, which that's saying
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, it's nice to see. So we're feeling pretty confident about the Bucks offense this week against Jacksonville. And then on the Jacksonville offense themselves, I mean, is there anybody that you're overly confident in here other than Travis Etienne, maybe Evan Ingram?
That's pretty much it at this point. Now, like keep in mind Trevor Lawrence dealing with a concussion, so we're gonna have to see if he clears protocol. I think if Trevor Lawrence is active, this could be an interesting spot for a Calvin Ridley, a solid day from Calvin Ridley, the Bucs secondary, allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Um, could be an interesting matchup. I trust Calvin Ridley, obviously, one-on-one against these defenders a bit more with Trevor Lawrence under center than I would maybe a CJ Beathard. We'll see how that works out. But, at this point in the week, in this crucial of a week, I'm trusting Travis Etienne, and I'm trusting, Evan Ingram, who hopefully they can just get him going across the middle of the field. Especially if Trevor Lawrence is out this game, they're going to need some of those layup shots. And I think that, Evan Ingram is more of that layup shot kind of guy.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And yeah, Trevor Lawrence did not practice today, still sidelined with the concussion. So that is concerning. Like you said, Calvin Ridley, he's another one of those guys with at least 11 targets in back-to-back weeks. It feels like it's coming for him, but I feel like you're going to need Trevor Lawrence to get him there. So he's definitely been very boom bust this year. And I don't know. It could be another one of those bust weeks, but yeah, I like Evan Ingram as well. I know he had the down week last week, but been really solid this year for as far as tight ends go. So that might be it for me as well. And yeah, Zay Jones didn't practice today either with knee and hamstring injuries. So Jags offense, our passing offense, could just be Evan Ingram as the primary target there.
I won't complain.
Yep, me neither. So looking at the Arizona Cardinals and the Chicago Bears now, um, start with Justin Fields because this was one I like that you put this one in the panic or antic as well because he's had fewer than 10 points in 2 of the past 3 weeks. So how are you feeling about Justin Fields as far as confidence levels go going against the Arizona Cardinals this week after some disappointing performances recently?
A couple of disappointing performances, but I mean, you couldn't ask for a better matchup against this Arizona Cardinals defense to just kind of get the ball rolling. Chicago, they're back at home, and this has been a very fruitful matchup, especially for the run, which guess what? Justin Fields, pretty good runner, in case you've never heard of him. I think this defense is going to be able to give up points both through the air and on the ground. And I think they're probably going to struggle a little bit to cover a quarterback like Justin Fields that has that dual threat ability. I'm starting Justin Fields with absolute confidence this week. I have him ranked as a top 6 quarterback. I think he's going to bounce back in full swing. No questions asked. Same for DJ Moore, lighting him up with full confidence. Cole Kmet, I consider more of a boom bust, like low end tight end 1, high end tight end 2. But, from the standpoint of how this offense matches up against a defense, I do think this is a pretty favorable matchup to reignite that spark that maybe they were missing there in week 15.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love Justin Fields this week. Love DJ Moore. Cole Kmet, I think could be a fine option this week as well, just because we like Fields so much. And I think even Nate wrote him up as a start sit. Cole Kmet, he wrote him up as a start this week, 6 targets in 6 of his last 7 games, averaging 13.2 PPR points per game during that stretch, which puts him at tight end 7. So you do like that for Cole Kmet. The running backs, as nice of a matchup as this is, Cardinals giving up the most fantasy points per game to the running back position. It is just a mess over there to kind of sort out. So Deontay Foreman, Roshan Johnson, Khalil Herbert, all working in. I don't want really any part of the Chicago backfield. It's just, yeah, it's gross.
It's playing Russian roulette with your
Yeah.
fantasy teams. No, thank you.
Yeah, not at this point in the year. So on the Arizona side of things, this is another group that, again, you don't probably want to mess around with too much. Trey McBride has been awesome, and it is a nice matchup for him. The Bears giving up the 4th most points per game to the tight end position. So we obviously feel confident starting him as he's been that good these past few weeks. And Kyler Murray, sure. James Conner, what about James Conner, guys? I feel like I'm not starting anybody on the for the wide receivers unless you are or feel particularly strong about any of them, which I don't. But how are you feeling about James Conner this week going against the Bears?
I don't love the matchup in particular against the Bears. This has been, relatively a relatively solid rushing defense, especially through the second half of the season. But from like a volume perspective, can't ask for much more from James Conner here. 16 plus touches in 4 of his 5 games since returning from an injury. That kept him out. I think he missed like 4 games, but when he's been in the lineup, he's been touching the ball early and often. Had a touchdown in each of the last 2 weeks. Again, I'm not expecting a whole ton, but was able to post 89 yards last week and including a touchdown against the 49ers. I think he might be rumbling a little bit, and even if maybe we don't get the most efficient day out of him, I think could be enough volume there to sustain some relevance there. And I agree with you. You're starting, Trey McBride with full confidence, obviously, top 3 tight end on the week, probably, for me. And that's
Yeah.
kind of where it ends for these Arizona Cardinals. I'm not overly excited about this offense. And, even from the standpoint of the Chicago Bears passing attack, like this defense could give Arizona a little bit more trouble, especially there in Soldier Field. Like that can be a tough place to play. We'll see what the weather looks like, but interested to see how this Cardinals offense comes out to look against them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like that call. All right, let's go to the Dallas Cowboys at the Miami Dolphins now. We'll start with the Miami offense because obviously Tyreek Hill missed last week's game. I haven't seen an injury report for today, so I'm just looking it up quickly here. He returned to practice on Thursday, so with that ankle
Hey,
injury, so that was nice to see. And it looked like Devon Achan, yeah, Achan, right? Is that how we were calling him?
yeah.
Yeah, returned to practice on Thursday as well. So nice to see for some of those fantasy starters because yeah, we like Tua Tagovailoa for the most part. It's not the best matchup this week against the Dallas Cowboys. It's kind of concerning just because the Dallas is so good at bringing pressure and Tua hasn't performed well under pressure this season. You look at some of his numbers. He's thrown for 505 passing yards total on the year when under pressure, which ranks 26th among quarterbacks. He's thrown just 2 touchdowns total when under pressure this season. And he's yet to throw more than 1 passing touchdown in a game against opponents whose defensive line ranks among the top quarter of the league in pass rush grade. So really kind of obscure stat there that I decided to pull. That I mean, Tua, he's been good. Like he's got the weapons. He's another one of those guys, right? Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devin Achan, Raheem Mostert that you love, and those guys can do the damage there. So I feel like the rest of the Miami offense pretty straightforward. How about you?
Yeah, I think if you need to start Tua, he's a fine start, but definitely not a must start at this point in the season.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, he has the weapons, but haven't always seen him, utilize those weapons to a point where it impacts his fantasy value. He's finished as a quarterback outside of the top 20 performers in 3 of the last 4 weeks. And even just from like an upside perspective, he hasn't finished inside the top 10 dating back to week 8. And even then, again, just not a whole ton of upside. So I don't think you need to necessarily start him if you have some better options. If you have like a Jared Goff, well, I know he's had like his ups and downs. I preferred Goff over Tua this week. You could roll the dice with Sam Howell. Maybe, Russell Wilson might, give you a solid outing. Even Baker Mayfield, I think I would probably take
Yeah.
over Tua heading into. So like there are a lot of options that I actually do want to consider here over Tua. But I'm starting Mostert, Achane, Waddle, Tyreek Hill, if healthy. Like,
Yeah.
they are what they are, and you know what? So are the Dallas Cowboys. Like, they are what they are. You're starting Dak Prescott. Again, not necessarily the best defensive matchup for the Cowboys on the other side of the ball. But both of these offenses just so potent. I know Dallas is on the road, which might have people a little bit nervous, but I have to imagine that Mike McCarthy's going back to the drawing board, looking at what in the world happened here against the Bengals in week 15. And I'm still starting Dak. I'm still starting Tony Pollard. Again, maybe tempering some of those expectations because the Miami Dolphins have been a really solid defense. But, especially since Jalen Ramsey has been in the mix here in the secondary, I think the only player that I'm really like a no-go on in the Dallas offense is Brandon Cooks. And that just kind of comes from the fact that he's already been a pretty volatile asset so far on the year. And I'm not sure I'm going to trust that volatility here against a pretty talented secondary.
I'm with you. I think you covered it there pretty well. So yeah, those are all the main points I think to cover for the Dallas and Miami offenses. So let's go to the New England Patriots at the Denver Broncos Sunday Night Football. Let's start with the Broncos offense. And like you mentioned, Russell Wilson could have a decent week this week. And I'm with you. And I think Nick as well, you know, has him a little bit lower, but he has him as a streamer to avoid this week. I'm so sorry. I thought it
Hmm.
was a positive thing, but Nick has him as a streamer to avoid, and I think it just focusing a lot on New England's high blitz rate and Russell Wilson struggling against the blitz this season. So he ranks 21st in big time throw rate, 16th in turnover worthy play rate, 19th in yards per attempt versus the blitz. So Nick's not as in love with him this week, and then even Nate actually wrote him up as a sit this week, Russell Wilson. So the Broncos kind of the clear favorites, could rely on the run game a little bit more. So I don't know. I mean, I don't hate Russell Wilson. It's not the best matchup, but you look at fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, but there's definitely a world here where he could end up with another one of those disappointing performances because he's had those this year for sure. So yeah,
I
I don't
don't
know. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't love the matchup for Russell
Right.
Wilson, but I do think that he's been one of the safest and least volatile assets that we've seen as a quarterback. I mean, he's pretty much been QB 10 to QB 12 every given week, regardless of matchup. So, like, from a safety perspective, I think, hands down, a safer play for me than a guy like Tua, who's, had probably a lower floor than Russell Wilson overall, and, not even as high a ceiling as you'd like to make up for that lower floor. The Patriots obviously very good against the run. Probably, just an inefficient matchup for opposing running backs. Like the greatest weakness they've had is more of these running backs in more of a receiving role. So, obviously that plays into Russell Wilson in particular. It's hard to imagine how this game's going to be. It feels like it could be a trap game for either one of these outings, but like Russell Wilson, I think he's a fine play. Cortland Sutton, fine, not super
Mhm.
excited. I'm not really excited for anybody, in this Denver offense this week in
Yeah.
particular, just because I don't think this is going to be a high scoring game. I already mentioned the Patriots, like their greatest weakness against opposing running backs has been more in the receiving game than anything. And then, you look at Denver and how they've utilized their running backs in the receiving game. It's kind of been like a split role between
Right.
Javonte. They don't have a clear cut guy that we could kind of pin as the go-to option. So this, I think, could be a little bit of a trap in any regard. But on the other side of the ball, is it Ezekiel Elliott or bust? Like,
Yeah, it feels like it might be because, yeah, Ramondre Stevenson did not practice on Wednesday. I haven't seen anything for today, so looking that one up again, it looks like he wasn't spotted at practice on Thursday, according to Mike Reese of ESPN. So, yeah, it could be very well Ezekiel Elliott or bust this week. The Broncos giving up the second most fantasy points per game to the running back position, so you do like that. Hunter Henry, obviously, he's got the touchdowns recently. There's maybe some touchdown potential there again with him. The Broncos giving up the most fantasy points per game to the tight end position, but Hunter Henry just feels super risky for me at this point in the season. But depends who your options are at tight end because there's been some disappointing players at that position. So could be an option. But yeah, even Demario Douglas, like I don't feel great about it. Like Bailey Zappi at quarterback, and yeah,
yeah,
I think it's Ezekiel Elliott. Yeah.
that's it.
Yep. Moving on to the Monday games, Las Vegas Raiders at the Kansas City Chiefs, and these are the Christmas Day games here. So,
Ooh.
um, let's start with the Chiefs. We got Patrick Mahomes. Looks like Isaiah Pacheco's back, so we like that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire filled in perfectly fine while Pacheco was out, but we could safely move Clyde Edwards-Helaire back to the benches now and
Yes.
plug Isaiah Pacheco into lineups. And then yeah, Travis Kelce at tight end we're starting, and then it is Rashi Rice season once again. Just been excellent. I mean, since week 12 when he finally saw more than 65% of routes run, he is the PPR wide receiver 3 in that span. So 3 touchdowns
Woo!
in those 4 games as well. He has been excellent, as we've been hoping for, as we've been asking for all season. So definitely comfortable starting Rashi Rice again. But anybody else for Kansas City for you?
No, you nailed it. Rashi Rice or bust. You're again, Kansas City, one of these fairly straightforward offenses. And I kind of think the same about Las Vegas Raiders. Like, obviously, coming off that hot win, I do think we're going to have Josh Jacobs back in this game.
Yeah.
Kansas City Chiefs, not like the most favorable matchup for opposing running backs, but I think you start him from a volume perspective. Um, I think the biggest question, obviously, you're starting Devontae Adams. What's your level of confidence here? For a guy like Jacoby Myers here against the Chiefs, had a pretty solid outing in their first meeting earlier this season. One of Jacoby Myers's touchdown games, which you absolutely love to see. But this is a defense that I think is kind of rallied a little bit. A few weeks ago, that line was 6 receptions, 79 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Can he repeat?
I don't think he's going to repeat to that extent. I think that was, a really nice one. And I think for Jacoby Myers, like I really like Jacoby Myers, but I think we're banking on the touchdown probably against Kansas City more than anything because I think the Kansas City defense again really good. I don't have like still a ton of faith in Aiden O'Connell. I know he had the 4 touchdown game there, but it was against a very hapless Chargers defense that clearly were looking to lose that game by a large margin. So I don't know that I really want to trust it again. It probably like wide receiver 3 range for me. I think that's perfectly fine for Jacoby Myers. I don't know that it's going to be that big, high ceiling game that we've seen in the past from him. So just hasn't seen the same target rate that he was earlier in the year, and that's kind of where the concern in comes from me, and just kind of hoping for him to find the end zone, but could be tougher here against the L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie and those sorts. So yeah, wide receiver 3 range for me feels fine, but yeah, not excited about him, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, especially last week in particular, saw Aiden O'Connell really like spread the ball out around
Hmm.
quite a bit. 5 different players with 4 or more targets on the day. Obviously, Devontae Adams like led that pack by far, but the fact that he dispersed targets that evenly outside of Devontae Adams, a little bit concerning for the upside of maybe some of these other guys. Got Trey Tucker involved last week, had 2 touchdowns. Again, not banking on that, but every, target for Trey Tucker is another one that, might be out of the window for Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer. Like none of these guys I consider um, true staples at this point beyond Devonte Adams that you're really going to trust here in a crucial game situation.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it really seems like they're making an effort to make Devontae Adams happy. I mean, they played him late into that blowout victory last week as well, and we're
Had the
still
stats,
throwing him the
baby. I'm
ball.
fine.
Yeah, yeah. So we do like that for Devontae Adams purposes, but yeah, it could be a little less for everybody else. So moving on to the other Monday game, it is the New York Giants at the Philadelphia Eagles. Anywhere in particular that you want to start with these two NFC East teams?
Let's start with the Giants, like fairly straightforward, I think, team. Obviously you're starting Saquon Barkley. I know the matchup on paper kind of looks a bit daunting against the Philadelphia Eagles. Overall in the season, ranked 31st in points allowed to the running back position, but as of lately, as this defense has kind of broken down in general, we've seen that defensive line been just a little bit more generous to opposing running backs. So I'm not too concerned for Saquon Barkley here. What's your temperature check? So let's say you had Darren Waller earlier in the season. Obviously he went out with that hamstring injury, has been absent, but came back last week, 6 targets, 4 receptions, 40 receiving yards. Like that's, really any tight end that's going to come into a game and get 6 targets, you're probably going to be happy with that as like a fringe tight end one, regardless of whether or not they score a touchdown. What's your level of confidence that like this could be another solid day for Darren Waller?
Yeah, feeling a little bit better about Darren Waller than I was last week. I had a feeling that they would kind of ease him into the lineup last week, and they did. He didn't play a ton of snaps. I think he played less than half the offensive snaps, but still saw that really nice target rate, which I think is the more encouraging sign here, right? And if you assume that he's healthier, and he's going to be playing a little bit more this week, which I mean, if they want to be competitive in this game, he's going to have to play a little bit more. So. Yeah, I feel pretty good about him. I think he probably cracks that top 12 um, tight end range for me this week. Probably just barely, but feeling okay about it.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think, especially given those limited snaps, um, you know, just from a standpoint of involvement, when you look at his target share on those very limited snaps, like you're going to presume that that's going to steadily increase as he reacclimates to game action. Um, just a overall encouraging sign on the day that we saw him as involved as he was, right out of the gate there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely nice to see. And we'll see what happens with Tommy Cutlets there because he was questionable. I know. I'm just looking at the injury report here. I don't see anything for him that says that he's dealing with anything. So I don't know. It might be back this week going against the Eagles. I don't know that it matters who's at quarterback for the Giants at this point, but still feel about the same for Darren Waller. I'm not starting any of the Giants quarterbacks anyways. So on the Eagles side of things, we're starting Jalen Hurts, we're starting AJ Brown, starting Dallas Goedert for the most part, Devontae Smith as well. So DeAndre Swift, I think we talked about this last week about him having a better week, and he did. He was definitely more involved. 18 carries for 74 yards. Not a huge game for by any means, but we at least saw that favorable game script, which I think was what we were expecting from DeAndre Swift last week. I think we could get more of the same from him this week in a game that the Eagles should be able to run the ball and have the lead in this game. So I do like DeAndre Swift again this week. Definitely in that starting range for me and not expecting a down week from him.
Yeah, definitely. I think right out of the gate, a little nervous seeing Kenneth Gainwell. It looked like it was almost going to be a Kenneth Gainwell
Yeah.
game. But yeah, DeAndre Swift definitely came through 20 total touches on the day. and outsnapped Kenneth Gainwell by a decent margin, 41 total snaps on the day to Gainwell's 28. You're very happy to see that involvement. He also saw 3 targets to Gainwell's 1, like across the board in terms of their usage. DeAndre Swift was in fact the guy. So you love to see that. And this again should be a favorable matchup to the run. Hopefully they can keep that going. But yeah, again, Philly, one of these pretty straightforward offenses at this point.
Definitely. All right, let's go on to the final game of the week. Monday Night Football has the Baltimore Ravens at the San Francisco 49ers. This one should be a good one. Let's start with the 49ers offense because I feel like this is a pretty easy one. We're starting
Check,
Brock
check,
Purdy.
check, check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. Any disagreements with starting any of those guys?
No, and like very interestingly, like obviously you have 2 of the best defenses in the league going toe to toe in this matchup, but also 2 of the best offenses in the
Yeah.
league going toe to toe in this matchup. So like from a matchup perspective, kind of just throwing matchup out of the window entirely and looking at these 2 teams for what they are, because obviously pretty well matched in terms of, offense versus defense and vice versa. You're starting all of the 49ers and on the Baltimore side, you're still starting Lamar Jackson. You're starting Isaiah Likely. I think maybe the biggest question, what's your trust level in Zay Flowers, who, had a down week in week 15, was super uninvolved, caught just 1 reception, 7 receiving yards. Do you trust that they're going to get him more involved here in week 16? Was that an anomaly? Because I feel like things seem to be trending up for Zay Flowers. And then, it also seemed like a favorable matchup for Zay Flowers. And then nada, kerplunk. Can you trust Zay Flowers in such a crucial week, knowing that this perhaps could be, a higher scoring matchup if these 2 offenses are playing at their best?
Yeah, I'm concerned about say Flowers for sure. The production's been down recently, they've been involving Odell Beckham a little bit more, at least as far as targets go. They seem to want to get him the ball when he's on the field. Isaiah Likely's done a nice job getting targets as well. So that's kind of left Zay Flowers as the odd man out for a few weeks here. Yeah, I think he's on the outs for me. As far as like startability goes, I feel fine starting Isaiah Likely and Lamar Jackson, like you said, but I don't want to start a ton of receiving options for the Baltimore Ravens, even in a matchup like this where there could be some fireworks here offensively, but I'm not trusting it. So Zay Flowers probably low end, like wide receiver 3 range for me this week.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Gus Edwards, I think you fire him up.
Yeah.
Obviously, the unfortunate season-ending injury to rookie Keaton Mitchell, I think, is going to force Gus Edwards back into a position like where he is the main guy. We'd seen his role kind of dwindle over the past few weeks with that emergence of Keaton Mitchell, but again, kind of they're elevating Melvin Gordon, but even the last time we saw Melvin Gordon active, it was Gus Edwards here who managed the majority of the work. You might see Justice Hill involved as a receiver, but like also we've seen Gus Edwards involved
Mhm.
as a receiver from time to time this year, and obviously they like him around the goal line. So definitely, firing up Gus Edwards even in a challenging matchup. But yeah, I think that's kind of the Raven side of the ball.
Yeah, I think it is as well. And I agree with Gus Edwards. I know, the matchup might look intimidating on paper going against the 49ers, but again, if you're going to bet on volume and touches here, I like Gus Edwards in that role. So he was averaging 13.9 carries per game prior to Keaton Mitchell's emergence from weeks 2 to 8, I think it was. So again, not an ideal matchup necessarily, but we know he's going to get the carries. We know he's going to get the goal line work. So from that perspective, I think Gus Edwards definitely is a startable option this week. So that is pretty much it for this week's slate of games. That wraps up all
We
of our
did it.
games here. So nice. Yeah, that's gonna do it here for the week 16 preview episode and week 2 of the fantasy football playoffs, of course. So thank you all so much for listening and or watching on the YouTube. We hope that every single one of you will be back next week, because that more than likely means that you won your matchup and will be looking to win a fantasy championship. A big thanks to Kate as well, for coming on here, helping the good people get the lineup set for a huge week. So Kate, thank you. And before you go, please let everybody know where they can find more of you and your work as well.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. That's Magdziuk. Also find my work at PFF. I've got the rushes and touches report every week. Also got the Panic Romantic column, and dropping Friday will be some high upside, high risk, high reward options to consider if you find yourself in a pinch.
Nice, like that. Yeah, as for me, you can find my work all on pff.com, IDP fantasy report, IDP rankings, wide receiver man zone coverage report, O-line, D-line matchups to target and avoid. All of that fun stuff is up there as well. So yeah, enjoy Thursday night football, Saturday football, Christmas football this week. Good luck in the semifinals, and hopefully you'll all be back again next week to do it again. So appreciate you all. And until next time, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and peace out.